And these fine people are going to play a game with us tonight. So let's go around the horn and have everybody introduce themselves. So let's start with Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian. I think Mazes is pretty great. The ones that I've played it.
Sure. Heather.
Hi, I'm Heather. I'm part of 9th Level Games, and Polymorph is awesome, and I cannot wait for people to have these games in their hands.
Scott.
Hey there, everybody. My name is Scott. I played a Polymorph game in the playtesting stage, and I'm very excited to see what Mazes has in store.
And Corinne.
Hi, I'm Corinne, and this isn't my first rodeo with Mazes, and I'm really excited to see where it's at now that it's ready to go to Kickstarter.
So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna set up, and we're gonna use some on-screen controls. We're gonna actually go through, and the 5 of us are gonna quickly make some characters, and we're gonna jump into an adventure. In fact, I'm gonna use an adventure based on some information from Daniel Walthall, who is at Axebane on the Twitters. It's a crazy little micro dungeon out of the one-page dungeon piece, which they've been doing that for 10 years. It's a thing I really like. One of the nice things is it's a Creative Commons, so for something like this, we can just give them some credit and we can mess around with it a little bit. And how we're going to mess around with it is we're going to play the game as it was created, but we have changed all of the stats like that to Mazes, because Mazes actually can do some OSR emulation very, very quickly. But
how easy is it, Chris?
How easy is it? Right? So, Mazes team here, as you can see, you should be able to see now on your other stream. What we have up is one of the character sheet for Mazes, and how we create characters in this game. And it's important for everyone to know at home that one of the goals for this is to create a system that allows us to create as many characters as we need, because we are trying to emulate novella-like experiences, short, fast stories, short, fast adventures. And so if someone has a story that they want to tell with one of their characters, everyone else can make new characters instantly. It's designed to be played in like 2-hour blocks, like most of us play at conventions and stuff. So the first, and this is the most important question that you guys are going to answer all night, is what do you want to do in this game? And so the questions are, I want to be the best. The answers are, I should say, I want to be the best at what I do. I want to be at the front of the action. I want to hit it with my sword. I want to fight. Or I want to keep everyone safe. Now, it just so happens that there are 4 of you, which is great, because that means 1 for each of you. And these are, if you look at the character sheet, what we call the roles, R-O-L-E, and it determines what you roll, R-O-L-L. So, Scott, because Discord has decided that you are the center of the action, what would you like to do?
I'm the chosen one. Thanks, Discord.
What would you like to do?
I guess I will be the...
Say that again, you cut out a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, I will be the best.
You will be the best at what you do, which is not talking on Discord.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right, so you're going to be the Paragon, which is the D4. So in the section on roll, if you just have a character sheet or a piece of paper, you can just sketch a couple of things down. Most of the things we're going to track directly here on the screen, so things will be easy. Corinne.
Oh boy. I want to protect.
So you are the D10. You are the Sentinel.
I feel like I always end up with a D10.
I think it's always what you want to do in a game.
I think you're right.
One of the things that we're doing with Polymorph that's different than a lot of role-playing games is instead of saying you have this archetype that's this archetype character that you play, instead we say, what do you want to do in the game? Because that's going to determine what you should be in your role, right? And the game mathematically is built around those things. So almost every time I've played this with you, Corinne, you're like, it's like, what do you want to do? You're like, can I guard everybody? And I want to fight things, but I don't want to start the fight. So it does count.
Tank life.
B Neff.
I want to hit it with my sword.
All right, so you're going to be the warrior. That's the D8.
Hell yeah.
And Heather Wilson, you are the vanguard, the D6.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So the paragon. If you look at the character sheet again, in the very bottom of the character sheet, we have hearts and we have crowns, right? And hearts is the number of hits you can take before you have to take a condition in order to refresh. And crowns is basically the currency you use to do super cool stuff. So, like, the easiest thing from a super cool perspective is I use a crown to cast a spell, or I use a crown to do a whole lot of damage with an attack, okay? So the paragon, the D4, starts with 4 hearts and 4 crowns. The vanguard starts with 6 hearts, which is also the D6, so it's easy to remember, and 3 crowns. The warrior starts with 8 hearts. Again, I'm sensing a pattern. And 2 crowns.
Hell yeah, very simple.
And the sentinel gets 10 hearts and 1 crown.
Great.
Now, in addition to that, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to choose a class. So on our character sheet, what we would do is we'd end up sitting and we're going to write a class name where it says class. And someday I'll figure out on OBS how to do like spotlighting and highlighting. But right now I'm just got a big cursor, and hopefully that's part of the stream. And it's where your class would go. So there are 3 core types of classes. There are warriors, there are experts and rogues, and finally there are magic users. So, in reverse order, since we started with, since Heather didn't get a choice, Heather, you get the, whoa! Heather died. Heather exploded.
Oh no.
Oh no.
So, while Heather runs away, as the vanguard, it's the right thing for her to do. Brian, which of these types of classes would you like to be?
Can you repeat that for me again?
Would you, so like a warrior, an expert and a rogue, expert rogue, or a magic user?
So I think, I want to say...
You're going to make a sub-choice to this. This is just which tree do you want to pick your apple from.
Yeah, like, I want to say that I am a warrior, but I think it's funnier if I'm a magic user.
Well, so this game system will super allow that, and it doesn't make any difference. I don't care if your attack rolls are for throwing fireballs, or for throwing knives, or for hitting it with an axe. And the system doesn't care either.
I'm going to be a magic user then.
So would you like to be the wizard, the witch, the necromancer, or the elf?
Nice.
Elf, you mean ELF?
I mean ILF, right? And I'll explain.
ILF.
Yes. So there's 2 things going on from
elf?
So you want to be an elf? That makes perfect sense. You can be the elf.
What is an elf?
Yeah. So many years ago, well, let me get in the Wayback Machine. I'm going to get close up. My good friends and design partners, Chris Davis and Dan Landis, made me take out all of the weird spellings in a game that we were making 20 years ago, because people know what that thing is. And now, looking back, I just realized, right, but as we were getting into the mazes piece, that one of the things that's really interesting is most people's understanding of fantasy tropes come from games that were influenced by Dungeons & Dragons, or from books that are based on Dungeons & Dragons, instead of like in the 70s where it was the other way around, right? All of these games were being based on these actual ideas. So part of this is to say, let's push some of those things out and make them weird again so that you have some discovery. Because part of the fun of the games in the late 70s was that. So one of the decisions I made about the setting for mazes is there are no elves and there are no dwarves, right? The elves left, Tolkien style. They got out. The dwarves died off. And elves, right? So elves spelled with an I are the bloodline of half elves that's still remnant in humans.
Yeah, that sounds like me.
So you have pointy ears and you have glowing eyes.
I sure do.
And otherwise, So, Brian, on the top of your piece, your first edge is going to be called the Sky Domain. So you have basically air magic.
Oh, neat.
All right. So we'll come back and we'll get some other things going in a second. So let's go. Heather Wilson.
Yeah.
Magic user, expert, and rogue, or warrior?
Let's go warrior.
Warriors. Your options are the fighter, the hunter, the knight, the captain, the bugbear, or the goblin.
I'll be the hunter.
Of course you're the hunter.
There was no other possible choice.
Heather, your key edge is ranged. So you want to write range down.
Yeah.
Corinne.
I was also thinking magic user.
Yeah. Wizard, witch, or necromancer.
Necromancer.
Bring it on. So your key edge is knight, right? The knight domain, Night.
Got it.
I love our team.
There are five in the system as it's going to come out in the Mazes zines. There is a very simple 5-color of magic system that also can be jettisoned in favor of like a traditional pick these spells kind of thing. So I'm kind of working on both sides so that you can actually stick it into the OSR. But the 5 colors are called Sea, Sky, Stone, Forge, and Night.
Nice.
So as a necromancer, your key edge is the Night domain. Scott.
Yeah.
Magic user, expert, or rogue, or warrior?
I will be the expert.
All right, to the
'Cause
options.
I'm already the best at something.
Right.
This is natural.
So one of the things, when as a paragon, right, being the best at things, you're gonna roll 1, right, on your die more often than anyone else. And whenever you're doing something that your class knows about, you're gonna succeed. Which is what makes the paragon the best at what they do. So your options are the thief, the venturer, which is like a dungeoneer, the noble, the innkeeper, the smith, the kobold, or the small folk. So small folk are like we got rid of all the hobbits and we got rid of all the gnomes and we said let's do the things that are cool.
Wow. Okay, so I think I am going to be the noble.
The noble. All right. So your key edge is
like I have attached myself to this adventure and
your key edge. Your key edge is rank, right? Because you are a noble.
I'm sorry.
Your key edge is rank. RANK. Rank.
Okay.
All right. And then, so the next thing that we do as a character, right? So now what we've done, we've already figured out our roles. We know what we roll in the game. And anytime you roll anything in this game, you're always going to roll the same die. So we don't have to worry about any other dice. You have your die, good to go. And then you got your first edge, which is the key thing about your character class. You got your class and your edge. And now, each of us is going to pick a key attribute. So in a lot of other games, they have a bunch of mathematical pieces that are defined as how do you explain what I'm good and bad at, right? All I really care about, because really most games all they really care about is what's the one thing I'm good at, right? Attribute-wise. So we have a whole list of attributes, and each of the classes has a choice of one of 3 as their prime attribute. So Scott, the nobles is, are you charming, wise, or beautiful?
So all three, baby.
I'm so pretty.
Nice.
All right.
Beautiful, baby.
Beautiful. Corinne, or Heather, you're the hunter. Are you wise, traveled, or dexterous?
Let's go with dexterous.
Excuse me. Brian, are you beautiful, stealthy, or cunning?
Oh God, I'm not cunning. That's for sure. I think I am also going to be beautiful.
This is crazy. It's great.
Nice.
And then Corinne, are you beautiful, iron-willed, or learned?
Iron-willed.
So what's really interesting is there are only 3 characters out of this entire list that have the option of a primary attribute of beautiful.
Wait,
And you picked
hold
all 3
on,
of
Chris.
them.
Hold on, Chris. Did you just say that we picked the only 3 characters that could be beautiful?
No, because any character could be beautiful. These are the only characters that it's one of their prime attributes.
We weaponize our beauty.
I plan to.
Yup.
All right. Now, the next choice that each character is going to make is...
So wait, is that an edge that we have, that thing?
Okay, so everything else that we're going to have in the game is an edge, right? And so if you look at this character sheet, you would just write down the edges, because these are, as players, these are your core abilities to change things that are going on in the game. Because generally, you're going to take an action, you're going to roll your die, and you're going to try to hit one of the numbers on the right-hand side of the character sheet. Edges are a way to generate opportunities to do other things, or more likely, to generate advantage in a situation. So you're going to get to roll 2 dice, and you're going to get to keep the better. Whenever you're doing something where you're rolling multiple dice, in advantage, if they both succeed, that's the equivalent of a critical. Okay? So if Brian or Scott, if you're, trying to put on the charm, right? You got all decked up and you go out there to talk, right? People are more than willing, you have an advantage when you're having those social type interactions because you're beautiful. Easy breezy cover girl. But so there's only 2 more choices that everyone has to make. And so the next one is about choosing which side of the balance are you on. So every class has 2 points, right? Those are like the 2 ideas that the class could go into, and you have to choose which one you want to do. So Brian, as the elf, are you well armed, or do you have knowledge of nature?
I have knowledge of nature.
Heather.
Lessons to ilk. No.
Heather,
Yeah.
as the hunter, you are already ranged, but are you well armed, or do you have a knowledge of nature?
Knowledge of nature. No, well armed.
There you go.
Since Brian already is knowledge of nature.
Overlapping specialties. That's the way to win. cover the minimal amount of ground the deepest as possible.
I'm well armed.
Well armed. The noble, do you have retainers, or do you have wealth?
Ooh. I have wealth.
You have wealth.
I already have retainers of my 3 friends.
I was gonna say.
And I have an undead army, so...
I already volunteered.
Well, Corinne, do you have retainers, in parentheses, skeletons, or do you have ancient lore?
I have retainers.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Right. So then the last thing that's going to happen, so now everyone has, at this point, their key edge, their key attribute edge. They have one side of that class piece, and you have your class. Remember, your class, the name of your class, can be used like an edge, right? So besides the fact that it gives you an ability to roll a 1 and still get a piece, it also has this piece where you can say like, oh, well, I'm the elf, so I would know where the CD bar is that,
in Ilfland.
Yes. So,
Yeah.
Still fine.
so the last thing that we have to do is now everyone gets to pick any one edge. There's no limit to it, right? There's no artificiality about like trying to create these things. Each one of these characters is going to be unique, and this is their chance to have a unique edge. And after we do that, we're going to get names, and then we're going to build some bonds between the party, and we're going to jump in and we're going to start playing. How does that sound?
Great.
Hell yeah.
All right. So I have a big list of the edges, but the edges come down into one of these sections. So it's either another attribute word, so another adjective about the kind of character you are. It's some kind of knowledge that's specialized around your character. It's something about combat. It's something about society. It's something magical. Or it's actually a magical domain. It's like an actual like spell casting. So, does anyone have something they want to drive into?
Okay, so when you say something about society, what if I wanted to like live in the woods?
So,
Talk to me about my options. Talk to me about the real estate market in the forest.
so you have a couple of things. You already have knowledge of nature.
Yep.
So, you could take the society edge of friends, and you could have friends in wild places.
No, I'm thinking about the opposite of that.
Yeah, but like your friends in wild places could be like, you know, animals and shit.
Yeah, don't you want to make friends with deers and stuff?
Sort of thinking about being more of like a hermit.
Oh, well then you probably, you already have a magical domain, so you can have another one of those.
Okay.
You could have gear from the knowledge set because you're self-sufficient.
Ooh, yeah.
Or you could take like alert, from the attributes list, or maybe hail or tough because, you know, you're out there and you're, you know, braving the elements.
So I think tough is probably what I want to go with because I'm feeling like I'm an elf, but I'm living on frozen lakes and like fishing and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean that's super great.
Like a snow elf.
Yes, snow elf. I'm into it.
Snow elf. All right, so I'm gonna take tough.
Take tough. Sounds great. Next options.
Well, if Brian doesn't want friends in wild places, I do.
Of course you do. Heather. Yes. So take friends in wild places.
Great.
So you can have friends in high places, friends in low places, friends in wild places, friends in dark places, and my personal favorite, friends in no places, which is for, you know, your necromancer and warlock types that are, you know, have friends in non-Euclidean space.
So wait, really quickly, I'm doing a takes backs. Can I have?
Now you want friends in wild places.
But I just want one friend. Can I have like a familiar? That an edge that I can have?
Yes, in fact, it's one of the magical edges. It's familiar.
Okay, I would like to have an animal companion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So instead of being tough, you're going to take a familiar.
Correct.
All right. So
and my familiar is going to be tough.
it could be a tough familiar. So you have a familiar. You have some skeletons. Yeah. And you have a noble that bosses you all around. I see a chain of command.
Yeah, it's working out real well here.
All right.
My familiar is a pygmy rhino.
Is a what?
It's a pygmy rhino.
Okay, damn.
It's a tiny rhino.
Your center of gravity is so low.
Yeah. It's like a more exotic donkey, Chris.
So, yeah, no, it's super good. So one of the things, and I haven't written this section of the book yet, but I'm really excited to. So talking about, like, elves and bugbears, like, and not being, like, there's dwarves and moon elves and everything, is a little section about doing a thing that I think that the Dragon Prince and Avatar, like the Avatar universe has done really, really well, which is create a sense of otherworldliness, which was expected in the source material that we don't get anymore, because people are like, oh, well, that's a Gith Yankee. I know all about them. It's like, how do you know about them? They don't even make any sense. Which is come up with creatures and things on the other side by just combining two ideas. So like, you know, the classic is the owlbear, but if you're like, oh, you know, the eel lions are particularly strong. So a tiny rhino doesn't in any way, shape, or form knock this game down.
No, not a tiny rhino. It's
a
like
pygmy
a
rhino.
donkey-sized rhino.
Huh?
It's like a donkey-sized rhino.
Yeah.
It's a pack beast.
Yeah.
To carry my stuff.
As you wander around listening to you know, heavy metal soundtracks in your head. I get it.
Frozen likes to Scandinavia.
Is it a woolly pygmy rhino?
Oh my god, it is. It is now.
Nice. Great.
I've seen this album cover. I've seen this tape cassette. There's definitely a dungeon synth. There's definitely a dungeon synth track about a woolly pygmy rhino and his Ilvan companion through the snowy wastes of Nordia.
Yeah.
Corinne, Scott, thoughts?
Yeah. So I want to be able to put a wall of dead things between me and all of my problems. What gets me there the best?
So there's a couple of ways that we could do that. So the first thing we could do is you could actually take a combat edge of armored, right?
Okay.
Which is basically you're going to use it to be like, oh, that's, you know, we're armoring up here, right? We could do something like that. You could actually have like a magical item or a magical weapon, like something that does that, like, you know. You already have the night domain, so that's where we can get around and we can talk about doing those kind of things. I definitely think it's more of an effect. So
yeah, you said armored. Is there like any sort of like shield keyword in there? Because I'm picturing it as just like,
you know what? I used to have shield and I took it out because it's just armored. It's just a different way of thinking about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I'll go with armored because
Yeah.
I like the idea of just telling my little skeleton boys to get between me and trouble.
Right. I love it. Skelly boys.
Yeah.
So Scott, what are you thinking?
I am thinking that a noble of my stature should have a dope sword.
That's dude. Besides the fact that I will 100% buy that album, because a noble of my stature should have a dope sword. It's definitely the first line of an epic rap battle that I want to be a part of.
It was a thing that our president said long, long ago. Speak softly and carry a dope sword.
Yeah.
So when you're making a magic, so magic item and magic weapon are a standard edge, right? Because one of the things that I think is very important in this style of fantasy role-playing is the idea of fucking dope swords, right? And so that means there's never such thing as a +1 sword, right? A magic sword, an enchanted blade, always is a storied thing. So you're gonna have to come up with a name for it, and it needs to have, it does a thing. What does it do? You know, does it light in the sense of danger? Does it erupt into flames? You know?
Alright.
You know, it's you don't have carte blanche. You're not. It's not one of the. You know, you can't make the mind sword or, you know, what's Elric's sword called? Not the Mornblade, the other one, Stormbringer.
Yeah. Let's see.
I'll let you think about it because you could reveal it later in the game when you unveil it. I think it's more fun if you don't tell us what it is.
Alright.
All right, so now everyone has all of their edges. You know what your roll is. You know what you roll. And just as a repeat, a couple of quick things about the system. when you take, there's 3 kinds of rolls that you can do. The first kind of roll is you can you do an action roll, and an action roll is I want to do a thing, and in Mazes it's boots, blades, bones, unless it's something that your class can do, and then that also triggers. The next type of roll, those are action rolls. Those are you as the player say, I want to do this thing, and then we're going to roll some dice. I've gotten rid of any kind of concepts in this game about timing and turns. It's definitely more on the narrative side. But each round of play, each turn, everyone gets to have a moment, right? And so when you take an action roll, that is you spending your moment. And once everyone's done a moment, then we're going to have another round, right? Since this is a player active game, meaning I, as the maze controller, as the MC, don't roll any dice. Once everyone else is gone, then I'm going to respond. And you're going to make saves, which is the second kind of roll, against the things I do. So I never roll a die to see if the eel bear eats you. You roll to try to prevent being eaten by the eel bear. Last kind of roll is an effect. Okay? An effect rolls, the most common one is damage, right? So you've done an attack, you've made a successful attack, and now you're going to roll your die for damage. Whenever you're rolling for effect, and there's lots of ways to mess around with this, the only roll that's really different is that when you're rolling for effect, you can always spend a crown to add an additional die. And if you roll your crown, which is the top number on your die, it explodes. You get another die. Make sense?
So is there a way for us to get more crowns if
Yes.
we use them all up? Cool.
So you can spend your crowns. You're going to spend your crowns and your hearts throughout the game, and you can refresh all of them by taking a condition. Okay. And the standard conditions are stress, tired, hurt. If you're stressed and you become stressed again, you become tired. If you're tired and you become tired again, you become hurt. If you're hurt and you become hurt again, you go down. And when you're down, you can't take any actions until someone comes and saves you. If while you're down, there's always a tiny chance while you're down that you could die. All right? So we'll see what happens. But you can always take a condition to refill your hearts or your crowns, right? So let's say that you are the hunter, right? And you are a vanguard hunter, so you have a D6, so you have 6 hearts. And then you get hit once or twice, right? And so you've lost all your hearts. You can then say, I'm going to become stressed to refill my heart so I can keep fighting.
Yep.
The most important rule about hearts is every time you take a violent action, you lose a heart. The most common way, other than taking conditions to get all your hearts and crowns back, is by a rest. And in order, you have to be in a place that is safe, and you have to spend a treasure. So if you look at the piece here, I just added this treasure pile, which I thought it was going to be a little easier, but the numbers don't quite work, but I'm almost got it there. It's about OBS. It's not about the game system. At the beginning of the game, everything you own is abstracted into treasure. So treasure is what you have. You can spend a point of treasure at any time to make sure that you have the right gear to do something or to create an opportunity to do something specific. Like, oh, you know what? We have that letter from the Countess, right? I'm going to spend a treasure to do that. If you're in a safe place, you can spend one to have everyone refresh their hearts and crowns.
Is treasure communal?
Treasure is communal.
Our treasure? Okay.
Treasure is communal. And the big question, and since you were the one that talked, Brian, you get to set it. How much treasure does the party start with?
So I almost certainly have, none. But I imagine that Scott is bringing enough treasure for the both of us.
Well, so. Scott has wealth, right? And wealth is a little different than treasure, right? Treasure is what you as a group have, and that's like your gold and items and gear and everything. When
Sure,
Scott walks into an inn, he doesn't have to pay for anything. They're like, my lord.
But like he had to hire me somehow, so I'm assuming that he paid me in treasure.
With that being said, Scott, what rank do you have?
So I'm sort of like picturing myself as like the son of a duke.
Okay.
I don't know if that's like a title or if it's just like a nobleman.
Yeah, like you're just five. Five's a lot.
Five is a lot.
So if more treasure means more danger, right?
That's correct. Thanks for bringing that up, my man.
Oh yeah, then 5.
So when you start, the other piece in this game is called the darkness. And as you can see, the numbers are all over the place because I thought that they would just work in order. They don't quite, but we're getting there. We start the darkness, which is like the level of danger going on in the game, equal to whatever the treasure is. And in mazes, we always start the game just as we are about to enter into the darkness. And there is a couple of different ways that you can gain treasure and darkness. The most common way to gain treasure is that, you've defeated some event or you found some treasure. Oh, we found a pile of gold. But on the other side, how do you get darkness? These are the things that can add to the darkness. 1, entering the darkness. I know it's a huge surprise. Everyone's completely freaked out by that you gain darkness by entering the darkness. And if you remember what I just said, the first thing you always do in a mazes game is you enter the darkness. You gain darkness by splitting the party. You gain darkness by retreating. You gain darkness by provoking a fight. You gain darkness by allowing something to resolve by letting time pass. And finally, you gain darkness if you would like to have a flashback. So at any time, we can flash back to some information and you're going to gain darkness. So a good example would be you're in the middle of a dungeon and you're like, oh, that's a wyvern. Thankfully, our necromancer is like, I'm going to do a flashback because we knew that we were going to see a wyvern. So I spent the last 2 weeks in the library getting up all this information and, preparing us for wyverns.
I still listen to doing deadlifts.
And by that I mean lifting each other.
Yep.
Deadlifts.
Yep.
The stream is over. Everyone's fired.
So that's everything that we need. Now what we need are names, and we're gonna do we can do up to 2 bonds. I don't have the full bond help list, so what we just need to do here is each player is going to create 1 bond with another player, and we'll go around starting with Scott.
All right. So
the reason that we need a bond besides some player pieces is you can use a bond to clear conditions. By role-playing your bond, you can say, I'm going to do this thing in order to become unstressed. Or to get less tired, right? It doesn't work for hurt, but for stressed or tired.
All right.
Well, before we do that, let's do. Actually, I just said that, but everybody needs some names.
Yeah.
Yes. I do have a name.
What is your name, Brian?
My name is Yurt Sideiron.
Is that Y-U-R-T?
Yes, it is.
Yurt Sideiron?
Yep. Spelled like it sounds. And my rhino's name is Creature.
That sounds great. Yurt Sideiron. Anybody else got a name?
I got a name.
What's that? What is it?
Spencer Cavendish the Fifth.
Wow.
God, I hate you so much more now.
Lord Cavendish the Fifth.
Fifth of his name.
Running Little Witch Academia.
Is that a thing?
There's a prominent character by the surname Cavendish in that series.
Hunter or necromancer?
I will be Noxon Nightblood.
Like Noxon Nightblood.
Yeah.
Not at all pretentious.
No.
And Hunter.
Guild Wars.
Nice.
Nice.
We'll go with. I wasnwasn't prepared to be thinking of a name, even though I knew I should have been. Shoulda. Yep. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. We'll go with sorry.
I just named you Shoulda.
I don't want to be called Shoulda.
It was just a really good visual joke.
Yeah.
The folks at home will see it because they're going to see the names coming up under your character.
Nice.
I will go. Boy, why is this name generator only giving me dude names?
Because it's the dude name generator.
Apparently. I googled fantasy name generators and I found this amazing site, and it just
shows you that the patriarchy is steeped in fantasy naming.
Yep. I'll go with Cersei doesn't have a last name.
You can just be like Prince.
Yeah, Cersei.
Oh, really?
Not spelled like Game of Thrones Cersei though.
No, I did it like the witch.
I figured you did, but I just wanted to say that for the people at home.
Yurt Side'iron, Noxon Nightblood, Lord Cavendish the Fifth, and Cersei. Lord Cavendish, you need to create a bond with one of these fine characters.
Well, I believe that I was on an expedition to the north, and I had a tour guide that I hired who was so good that I've decided to make him my permanent tour guide, and his name is Yurt Side'iron.
Yurt Side'iron.
That does sound like me.
All right. So Yurt Side'iron and Creature. Who do you have a bond with?
Cersei once traveled in my land for the long hunt, and she brought me a meal that I have yet to forget.
Nice.
Cersei, what is your connection with Noxon Nightblood?
My connection is, let's see, there was a time that I was on a hunt and my quarry got away, but I needed to make sure that it was dead. So I talked to I talked to Noxon because I knew that Noxon would be able to contact the underworld and determine whether my quarry had died some other way.
Love it. Noxon Nightblood, what is your bond with Lord Cavendish the Fifth? I will point out, the bonds don't have to be positive.
Yes.
So when the game's finally completed, there'll basically be, for each character class, there'll be 2 questions that they can ask. So the kobolds ones are, the one says, make a bond with someone that you think is strong enough to protect you. And then the other one says, make a bond with someone that you know you are smarter than.
I am contractually obligated to keep an eye on little Spencer, and it is a contract that I have with his father.
Is it a contract, or is it a blood pact? Is it a? Is it magical or is it
it's probably
monetary?
a blood pact.
Huh?
I said I'm a necromancer, so I guess it's probably a blood pact.
Seems
I
real.
feel like I exclusively deal in those.
I exclusively deal in death.